The Ouija board. It is a popular tool for communicating with the dead, often making its appearance in the Western media. In my personal opinion, I believe that the Hmong people have their very own version of the Ouija board. It is called Jodapata, and it bears many similarities to the Ouija board. In the making of this video, I did surf the internet just to gather more information and do more research on the subject. I found out that the internet offers very little information about it, so if you by chance know more about Jodapata, please feel free to let me and the viewers know in the comments section below. There were stories shared with me recently that made me aware of how much in common Jodapata and the Ouija board have together. For those that are not familiar with Jodapata, it is a Hmong ritual known for communicating with spirits and seeking answers about the unknown. The Hmong term Jodapata translates to releasing ghost basket, or performing ghost basket in a sense. Essentially how it works is, you create an empty vessel and then invite a spirit to take control of it. Once a spirit is present in the vessel, you can start asking it all sorts of questions. You can often find people using it to find out what sickness one may have, or just getting help finding a misplaced item, or a popular one amongst young girls is asking about who their future lovers will be. These are just a few of the various reasons why one may want to use the Dapata ritual. To give you a better idea of how it works, I'll dive deeper into the process of how it's done. So first, the vessel needs to be created. Essentially, it looks like the upper half of a body. Like its name, ghost basket or Dapata, you flip a basket upside down and use it to represent the torso. And then you poke a stick from one side of the basket to the other to act as the arms. And then you tie a gourd or some sort of ball on top of the basket to represent the head. Lastly, you put a shirt on it. Next, someone needs to go outside and call into the night sky and search for a spirit from the stars that's willing to come and possess the basket. This empty vessel or ghost basket needs to be held and balanced between two people that are sitting across from each other. Once a spirit has entered the basket, it becomes significantly heavier. Of course, not like 50 pounds, but maybe like 5 pounds according to what my mom has told me. And it'll start moving on its own, just like how the Ouija board planchette starts moving on its own. The basket will remain in a slow side-to-side light movement throughout its whole stay to make it known that it is present. When you ask it a question, it'll make a certain movement to mean a certain thing. For example, if you ask it a question and it intensifies its side-to-side shakiness, like it's shaking its body, that means its response to you is no. If it knocks one of its arms onto the ground, it is telling you yes. Otherwise, for more complex answers, it'll attempt to draw it out on the ground for you, act it out, or it'll point. At this point, you might be wondering what could possibly go wrong with Jodapata for me to compare it with the Ouija board. Well, the same way that the Ouija board offers a supernatural connection, so does the Jodapata ritual. The biggest thing that runs parallel with the Ouija board and Jodapata is that you never know what you might be inviting, and whatever you invite, they might never want to say goodbye. Story 1. In 2004, my uncle left home on foot and went missing, following a huge argument with my aunt. After 3 days of not being able to find him, my aunt and eldest cousin filed a missing persons report for him. There wasn't much that emerged from going to the police, so my aunt resorted to using the dapat as suggested by her work friend. The work friend came over and taught her how to do it. They asked dapat about my uncle's whereabouts. The dapat indicated to them that my uncle was within close proximity and started poking at the wall of the same room that they were sitting in, as if urging them to investigate. It turned out that the dapat was correct. That night, my aunt caught my uncle being not far from home at all. My aunt, they lived in townhomes with many other Hmong people, and he was hiding with the recently divorced lady that lived right next door. It was revealed that he had a secret affair with her. After discovering my uncle's infidelity, my aunt divorced him soon after. My aunt gained a reputation as the woman who found and uncovered her husband's infidelity through the precise revelation of dapat. People began seeking out my aunt, requesting her assistance in performing the dapat ritual. Each visitor would leave a small tip as a token of appreciation, and over time, her clientele grew steadily. The dapat thing bloomed into a small business for my aunt and her work friend. They eventually quit their production line jobs and focused on assisting people with their dapat requests. However, after some time, my aunt's behavior took a peculiar turn. Additionally, my cousins would report experiencing scary stuff in their house. One night, my cousin Nana, who was 6 years old at the time, she recalled that my aunt woke her up from the room where she was sleeping with her older sister. My aunt brought Nana to the living room to cradle her to sleep on the sofa. The next morning, the rest of my cousins found Nana sleeping on the sofa, cuddling with the dapat that my aunt had been using to perform rituals for clients. When confronted, my aunt had no recollection of ever doing such a thing. Many of my cousins feel that there were entities in the house aside from just them. On several occasions, my cousins recounted walking by a room, believing they had a glimpse of my aunt engaging in conversation with people, only to find upon closer inspection that she's actually alone. If you stand outside their townhome by the playground, you can peer through the front window into their kitchen. Both Nana and her brother Kong frequently joined the neighborhood kids at the playground. They both, along with many of the neighborhood kids, have admitted to witnessing an elderly lady wearing a red hat trailing my aunt while she's doing her tasks in the kitchen. My grandmother grew concerned about my aunt and my cousin's safety, so she sought the guidance of a shaman. The shaman investigated, and he concluded that due to my aunt's frequent and extensive involvement with the dapat practice, it seemed as though she had gained recognition in the spirit realm, attracting malevolent entities. Consequently, this opened a portal in their home, inviting spirits to come in and out freely. As an attempt to stop all this, my grandma refused to let my aunt and her friend practice the ritual any longer. All baskets and materials were thrown away, but then, miraculously, they would appear back in the house somehow. The entities became mad, so every night they would knock on the walls and windows, mimicking the sound that the dapat would make when knocking its arms on the ground. My aunt eventually changed her faith to Christianity and had a priest come over to bless her place. That seemed to help and got rid of everything. They did still sometimes hear the knockings at night, but that was about it. Nana and I share the same age, and we're super close. After the whole situation calmed down, my mom allowed me to go sleep over more often. However, as a kid, I always feared that since my faith wasn't Christianity like them, I was scared that I might be visible to the dapat. I was scared that the dapat might single me out and haunt me, or that my aunt would show up in the middle of the night and behave in a creepy way like she did with Nana. Story 2. I used to live in a small village back in Laos with a dozen other families during the wartime. My husband and father-in-law were away fighting, which left me alone with my mother-in-law. Like us, the rest of the village was left with only women and children. There was one particular night All the dogs in the village were barking more than usual. An elderly lady named Nthangajay, she lived in a small house that was about 25 to 30 feet away from ours. My mother-in-law and I were able to hear her groan in pain and cry for someone to help. Nthangajay described her stomach being in excruciating pain. My mother-in-law and I headed over to her house. By the time we got there, a number of other ladies in the village had already gathered at her house. As soon as I arrived, everyone made way for us to squeeze through the door, and they invited me to join the rest in taking turns massaging the Nthangajay. Hmong people believe that pregnant women carry a special healing ability. That's why they especially wanted me there, because I was pregnant with my first son at the time. However, as the night wore on, Nthangajay's pain only got worse, and the dog's barking only grew louder. Knowing that there were no men left in the village, there was very little we could do for her if she were to pass that night. It was evident to me that everyone was becoming very stressed. While we were massaging Nthangajay on the bed, my mother-in-law said,
In the
case that there was something spiritually wrong with Nthangajay, my mother-in-law wanted me and her to go back home to perform a Dapatau ritual to find out. My mother-in-law was somewhat skilled at Dapatau, and I've helped her a handful of times before, so I knew the drill. As soon as we both got home, I hurriedly put together the raggedy Dapatau vessel together, and I handed my mother-in-law a piece of wood from the fire. She brought the wood outside. With a little fire still active on the wood, smoke was coming out from the tip of it. She waved it in the air and looked up into the sky, calling for a spirit to come into the Dapatau. I sat on a wooden stool holding the basket, waiting for my mother-in-law to return. As she spoke to the sky, I could hear the dogs that had been barking loudly at the village entrance getting closer to our house. The atmosphere became unsettling, and my mother-in-law appeared to be more hurried than usual to come back from calling the spirits. Regardless, she returned to the stool across from me and held the other side of the Dapatau. It was positioned so that the Dapatau's front is facing my mother-in-law, since she was going to do all the talking, and I was simply there just to help. My mother-in-law asked, Dapatau, are you here yet? We both waited silently for a sign. Just moments later, a grip on the base of the Dapatau became firmer and firmer, as the basket became heavier and heavier. She asked again. Dapatau, if you're here, tap on the ground so we know you're here. With neither of us dictating the movements of the basket, it starts moving. It slowly tilts to one side to accumulate weight, then abruptly shifts it back all to the other side, causing its arm on the other side to knock hard on the ground, letting us know that it is now present. My mother-in-law continues with asking whether it is a female spirit. It shakes intensely, letting us know that it was not a female spirit. Following that, she asks where the spirit has come from. The basket tilts itself 90 degrees, and its arm rises straight up into the sky, as we expected, from the stars. Nthangajay's pain has not subsided, as her groans could still be heard from her house. In a hurry, my mother-in-law jumped straight into asking why Nthangajay wasn't feeling well. The Dapatau quickly tilted and drew a circle onto the dirt ground, and then it pointed to the jar of water that was sitting in the corner of the house. We both looked at each other and tried to articulate what that meant. My mother-in-law was in deep thought for a second, and then asked Dapatau if it perhaps had to do with a lake or pond. The Dapatau shakes, telling us that it had nothing to do with a body of water. It left the both of us feeling confused. My mother-in-law followed with more questions, but it went in circles with Dapato. After a while, we were still not able to gain an understanding of what Dapato was trying to tell us. Dapato seemed to be frustrated too, so, in a fast motion, it spun around and pointed right at my mother-in-law's mouth. At the time, I still had no idea what was going on, but the picture seemed to have clicked for my mother-in-law, judging from her expression. She broadened her shoulders and tried to act brave, but you could tell it was to disguise some sort of fear. I had my guard up too at this point.
Đã bắt đầu thọ bắt ta có tuổi nụ tiệt có tuổi có thứ tuổi có trả tệ đầu sống tuổi với có tuổi sáu tuổi tiêu.
My mother-in-law asks, Dapato, we had asked you earlier where you came from. You raised your arm into the sky. Are you actually from the sky? It shook profusely, denying being from the sky. Only then did we both realize that when its arm was pointing straight into the sky, so was its opposite arm pointing straight into the ground. How do you look like? My mother-in-law proceeded to ask. Dapato turned and pointed at my hair, and the next thing it did gave me goosebumps. I felt as if my mother-in-law forcefully yanked the Dapato towards her, making it fly out of my hands. It landed right on my laps, lying face up, in the position that many Hmong people associate with death. I panicked. I jumped out of my stool and shoved it off my lap. My mother-in-law took the Dapato and forcefully waved it over the fire. She burned some money paper and told the spirit to go back to where it came from. As a repercussion of performing the Dapato ritual, we needed to hide from any bad entity that we may have gotten ourselves involved with. That night, my mother-in-law hung a branch outside of our house to signify that we were now Yai, meaning that we were refraining from going outside and that we were prohibiting guests from coming over. We had no choice but to abandon our mission to help Netaingaje. Even though the Dapato was disassembled, I couldn't bring myself to look at the basket that was used for the vessel. In my peripheral vision, it felt like the basket was moving. If you understand Hmong, you'll understand when I say that my eyes were super ticklish that night. Before the sun had a chance to come up, we heard wailing in the direction of Netaingaje's house. We knew that she had probably passed. We stayed inside for the next several days and never got the chance to send off Netaingaje with the rest of the village. We regret not being able to perform a proper Dapato ritual to see if we could have possibly saved her, until my husband and father-in-law returned to migrate us into a new village with more people. My mother-in-law and I never spoke of the incident. That night, when my mother-in-law and I did the Dapato ritual, she figured out whose spirit was inside the Dapato vessel. Hua was a young, handsome man, known to have long hair. He was devastated when he found out that his parents were against him marrying his girlfriend, who was from a poorer family. In retaliation, he bit off a lump of opium and chugged water to take his own life in front of his parents. Hua's parents felt rage and shame towards him for taking his own life, so they left for a new village. His deceased body was abandoned without a proper funeral. What were his intentions that night? We'll never know if it was good or bad. But with what my mother-in-law saw that night, we couldn't risk finding out. When the Dapato fell laying on my lap, from my mother-in-law's view, she was able to look into the hollow basket. Inside, she described seeing a bundle of something that looked like a head with hair on it. And with that, we have reached the end of this video. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you haven't already, please kindly show your support for this channel by giving it a thumbs up and subscribing for more content like this.